yet another installment of our adult forum. Today we are blessed with RoMa Johnson, whom we all know. She really needs no introduction, but and as you know, as you've heard many times, she has been trained in bereavement care, in accompanying those who are experiencing loss and grief. And in fact, it's this Friday, right? Is the bi-monthly bereavement group, which meets right here in the Transept Chapel, which she leads. She also is very experienced in ministering to, I would say, as she puts it, the Supremes, and otherwise known as, traditionally known as the elderly or aging. But she has a lot of experience in that ministry as well. And probably most of you know that she is also an artist. And so today we're going to hear about how these different things, especially the grief ministry, dealing with bereavement, how that ties into RoMa's artwork. So I'm excited about this conversation that Mako is going to lead us in. And before we begin, the Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Loving God, we thank you for your mercies, which are new every morning, for this opportunity to gather and be challenged in our thinking, to be inspired, to learn new things about you, about ourselves, about our fellow parishioners. We pray that you would speak to us through RoMa's artwork and her ministry, that we would have a deeper understanding of your love and your care for creation, and especially for those who are hurting and experiencing loss. And we ask that you would bless this conversation, bless the question and answer time afterward, and we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Marco.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. So, RoMa, you live right here.
Right down the street.
And you were kind enough to host me and Jacob, my assistant, and we got to, and we walked in and we saw immediately it was filled with art and materials, and it was almost like walking into a studio rather than an apartment.
Yeah, there's not much room for me.
That's what it felt like. And I was really, as an artist, it was a kind of a space that I felt like I was coming alive, where you were giving yourself to others. It didn't feel like your art was so much about self-expression as much as a journey that you went on. I could see that immediately.
Oh, that's good.
Well, and the materials laid out, right? It seemed like it was almost as if it wasn't just for you. Tell me about that. What?
Well, I started making art I've always made art. I've always done collages and doodles and stuff like that. But I think that I got much deeper into my art when I started with grief work and my own loss of my own family members and my own alienation and loneliness and whatever. And I began to do more art more often. So I would paint every day instead of whenever I had 5 minutes. And so the art that I made was just simply an expression of where I was at that particular moment. I wasn't doing it for anybody. I was just trying to get something out, you know. I think when you're grieving, so much is pushed in and down, and you're trying to just hold it together and just hang on. And it needed to come out. And for me, it came out through art. And yeah.
So this is one of the pieces that, anybody visiting her can see. Tell us about this.
Well, when my husband died, I was painting at my kitchen table, and I've never been trained in art, so I start with an empty page. I have never known what's going to show up. So what showed up was this spaceman in the circle there, going through a chasm of dark and stark and pointy mountains on either side, and kind of dark colors, and you couldn't figure out where he was going. And that's how I felt. I felt like I was in this capsule and I was going somewhere, but it was a strange world. I had nowhere in mind. I didn't know where I was going to end up or where I was going. And so through the years, I've painted the spaceman probably a dozen times. You'll even see it on the front of one of the books that's going around.
One of the things that many friends of mine who are psychotherapists or counselors and deal with art has told me is that many times artists is not aware, but once you find a symbol, or you end up, let's say, painting butterflies, but it's not just a butterfly, but it's a particular butterfly. It may not exist in the real world, but you start painting in patterns and colors, and one therapist told me, well, you have to pursue it. Even as an artist, you're not quite sure why you're doing it, but there's something about that butterfly that is taking you places.
Right.
And so ever since then, I've been very interested in whenever I see an artist pursuing a mystery, let's say, and find a particular form. In your case, it's a circle, right? It starts with that. Everything starts with a circle. What does that mean? And what is the spaceman doing inside a circle?
Well, I think the circle for me has to do with the circle of life. The seed to the tree, to the limb, to the fruit, to the dropping to the seed. And sometimes when you're in sorrow or grief, you feel like you're underground and you can't see where you're going, but you may be gestating. In my case, the circle in this picture was the capsule that the spaceman was in. And over the period of time, they got prettier and prettier. In fact, this is a recent one where he's kind of friendly and looks like a nice thing, but they weren't always. They weren't always. Sometimes it looked really grim, like the spaceman was stuck in the capsule and would never get out. So when I start a painting or any piece of art, I start with a blank page, and really the only way I can get myself going is to start with a circle. So I put a circle, I draw a circle on the page, and then I let whatever it is comes through the circle. Sometimes it's the head, you'll see. Sometimes it's the halo, sometimes it's the moon, sometimes it's the sun, whatever. But you'll see as we go through some of these paintings that the circle is pretty much always there.
So you're going through grief, and you're still not sure what that means to you.
Right.
And you begin with a circle. It's extraordinary to me that your journey is a genesis point, right? Circle is a genesis moment for you. But a lot of people, I don't think, will see a circle and make it a starting point, right? They don't know what to do with it.
Right.
What would you say is if somebody is in your room, maybe creating something with you, you start with a circle and the person is stuck? What kind of advice would you have to that person?
Well, I think when you're stuck, or for me, when I'm stuck, I start with color. I don't start with trying to draw something, because I can't draw, for one thing, or not well. And so sometimes just starting with color. I've actually had people take tubes of watercolor and just squirt different ones onto the page, and then get the squirter bottle from the ironing board and squirt it and watch the colors run into whatever they're going to do, leave it for a while, and then when the colors are dry, you can look at it and see what you see in it, kind of like a Rorschach. And, it's, oh, that looks like a butterfly, or that looks like a spaceman, or that looks like the halo of the Virgin or something.
It sounds like anybody could do this.
Anybody can do this. If I can do it, believe me, anybody can do this.
So I'm looking at this, as a fellow artist, and I'm observing a few things. You can see how the circle became an entry point for her, and then all of a sudden you're creating another circle. I don't know what the sequence was, but that's how I read it. And there are overlaps,
Right.
and you're taking advantage of the overlaps, so you create you start to create patterns. When did the spaceman come into this picture?
Oh, the spaceman was there when I first drew the first circle.
Oh, okay.
And I drew the little person in the corner, which is me, basically. I've always fantasized myself as about a 9-year-old girl, and so she's going, whoa, there's this spaceman, and it's the first time I've ever put another being or person or anything in the spaceman picture, which was kind of a breakthrough for me.
Tell me more about that.
Well, I felt like I was finally coming into the world. I was isolated and I had moved. I didn't know anybody. I was grieving. I was just, encapsulated, I guess. And all of a sudden I realized as I was painting this and all these colors and all this beauty was coming out, it was like, hey, I'm gonna get out of this capsule one of these days. But for now I can see it. That's me pointing to it going by.
So, this is extraordinary. So what happens in art oftentimes is you're discovering things that you yourself thought was impossible, right? And we have all these preconceptions of, what is impossible. And if you're an artist of any kind, you have been told that what you actually do is impossible. Right? Don't do it because that's not practical. You're not going to be able to make a living, blah, blah, blah.
Blah, blah.
Right? The world education system tells us that you can't do it. And so anytime there's a breakthrough, right? And I think there's breakthroughs everywhere, but I didn't think about you placing yourself in the picture as a breakthrough. Then that impossibility of what we have preconceived to be impossible in us breaks open in some way. So, okay, so you found yourself in the picture, and the spaceman is still there. There's another form there. So that's you're watching.
That's me watching the spaceman go by, but I've never been in the picture. The spaceman's been this alien. So it's like, in this picture, I don't feel like he's such an alien. It's like I'm waving at him, It's like I see you. I don't know. It all came kind of naturally. I didn't plan the picture, believe me.
Do you have a question? Yeah, I was wondering.
Like a key. You're pointing at something which looks like
I'm pointing at the spaceman going by.
Yes, so there's another circle there, and yeah, that's referring to the space.
It's a multiple episode happening.
Yeah, multiple episodes overlapping.
But it does look like a key.
It does look like a key. Yes, it does
It
look
does
like
look
a
like
key.
a key,
Yeah.
but I didn't make it to look like a key.
Now, here's an interesting point, right? You saw something,
Exactly.
and that opens up another door for us. Even you're not aware of.
No.
Okay, read.
When I see this, it reminds me of The Little Prince.
The what?
The Little Prince.
Oh, the Little Prince, yeah.
And because you have this young person kind of alone on the planet looking in, and I was, and probably maybe the same age, I was wondering if that entered into it at all, the story of The Little Prince.
Not for years and years, but I know the story of the Little Prince, yeah. Well, I think The Little Prince is about, you know, metamorphosis and coming into being and coming into awareness. And that's basically a lot of what I do. And you'll see in...
And exploration.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well-
I think the other thing that's important is that you didn't know. You know, and that, but for someone else, that is what came out of that.
Right.
And that's, I think, the value of art. Basically, it's alive. It is much more than what we have put into it.
It is alive. That's the point.
Yeah, and I want to just mention how courageous it is to do this.
Mhm.
Because I know that for many of us, you know, myself included, you know, I'm an artist, right? It's hard to be honest with yourself, first of all, to your emotions, to your conditions, because you make yourself so vulnerable
Yes.
when you do this.
Okay.
Tell me about that, not necessarily you intending that, but what is that process that draws people in to that process? You know, you are bereavement counselor, you give yourself to the world in many ways. How do you invite people into the process of creativity, imagination, but risk-taking?
It is about risk-taking. And I've worked with people, well, I'll tell you one funny story. I work with writers. I do writing coaching as well. And so I had a person that was being coached by me, and I was giving this person assignments, little ones, like when you come back next week, bring me 3 sentences about something you saw that caught your eye. That was the assignment. And every week this person really struggled to get this assignment done. And one day, this person walked into our time together, and I said, "How are you doing?" She said, "Well, I had to sit in the parking lot and do my writing because I knew I was coming to the reckoning with RoMa." So I don't know how I succeeded in drawing her in, but she got scared of me anyway.
But because it's a risk.
Very risky for her. It was very, very risky.
And how did you guide her?
I basically talked to her about what did she have something in her head? Was there a voice in her head telling her something? What was the something? And the something was, this is going to be shit.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This is just going to be shit, so why bother?
Yeah.
And I said, so whose voice is that? You know? And she named a family member, you know, from long ago that had that voice, that her work was never going to be up to par or whatever. And I said, well, let's talk to the voice here, you know? And so and I'm doing a new project about talking to that voice, which is an aside, but let's have a conversation with that voice. Let's don't let it have the last word. Oh, you think this is shit? You know?
Yeah.
Let's talk about this and engage with that voice.
So I am sure every single person in this room has heard that voice from somebody.
Everybody has that voice.
Yeah, it could be a third
Lucky
grade.
us.
Yeah, it could be a third grade teacher who said, "No, you're an artist.
Yeah.
You know, you should be this. You should be that." Everybody's an artist until third grade.
I was a straight A student. Except I took one art class and I got a D.
Follow your path.
So I never did art again for years.
Well, it's kind of like Matt, you know, 2 weeks ago, his doctor saying you shouldn't run. And so he began to run with massive sprint. But, okay, so, yes, go ahead.
Was the symmetry conscious or unconscious?
Well, I do a lot of things sort of geometrically. I often line out the graph or the grid on the paper in pencil just because it helps me to line things up, but it also helps me to get in the flow. I'm doing something. I'm moving the pencil across the page. That is the beginning. So this one is very symmetrical. You'll see if we show some of the others that they're not all like that.
It's kind of very, I see this and this cosmology of it and psychology that is being revealed. Reminds me of the aurora. The aurora that we just saw in the world. If you look up that and the wonderment of that, I was outside and I saw this aurora and I was like screaming. I was like the hedgehog, and I felt like a child again. Is that part of the process?
Absolutely. I actually, at some point in time, start to fall in love with the picture. Like the picture of the frog. I don't know if you've seen the frog, but
yeah, we have 12 or 13 images. We're not going to get through all of them today. It's already, but that's what we talked about, right? And if you fall into this process of making, and you don't have to be a professional artist, you don't have to be good at making, you don't have to be anything but a human being, it seems. Anytime you look at an image, even going outside to see nature, or going to a museum certainly, or watching film, there's a connection that we build. I think it's a literal connection that our neurons kind of start to regenerate. And those voices that say no to that, right, which we hear all the time actually, and we have trained ourselves to heed to that voice rather than to take risks. And so this is the whole point of this discussion is, first of all, you all need to visit RoMa. I hope I'm not overstating the case here and maybe,
bring coffee.
Yeah. She's right there. And in many ways, your presence here in this community is so valuable because of your open heart and invitation to any of us, perhaps in one of the hardest journeys that we go through in life, right? And you're willing to be there with people.
Yeah. Yes, come down, bring coffee, come and paint. I love having someone sitting and painting when I'm painting. And I have a friend who has a studio in Scotland that her husband built her this huge octagonal table, with 8 wedges. So if you go to the studio, you just get a wedge, and there might be 8 other artists working at the same time, or 6 or 5 or whatever. And it's so wonderful, to just be among all that creativity. It's just fabulous, So we have the frog up in case you know.
Okay, here's the frog.
There you can see
Talk
the
about
circle.
this
I
frog.
started with the moon.
Yes.
And made the frog. My brother loves frogs, so I decided to make him a frog prince.
So let me ask you about that, because every single work, it seems, you're speaking about or speaking to somebody.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's kind of not a portrait, but it's a conversation.
It's a conversation, and sometimes it's like a portrait. Like I've done a couple of pictures for Kevin that have to do with how I see Kevin, not as Kevin the person, but the imagery that I get from Kevin, the dancer, the singer. And and a couple of others that were a little more personal, but this one I was thinking of my brother, and so I made a frog. So
Tell me about that frog. Like, why does your brother?
well, I just think that's hilarious. I mean, the whole time I was working on it, it just cracked me up, and I couldn't wait to send it to my brother. Didn't want to tell him that it was coming. I didn't want to tell him what was coming, and so I had a print made of this, and sent it to him. And I just was waiting for FedEx to get to his house.
How did he react?
What was his reaction?
How did you react?
How did he?
How did he react? He fell on the floor laughing and didn't get up for 3 days. It's just the silliest thing you've ever seen, don't you think? Anyway.
Okay, we don't want to go to you, but just to flag this moment here. So you created this work, which you're taking a risk to, in a sense. You're going out of, nobody's asking you to do this, right? And you're thinking about your brother, and your love comes through, and the humor that you had in this relationship comes through. And of course you send it, and the actual question is, how do you respond? Because a lot of times, right, what we intend does not communicate, right? So that's another risk. That's a huge risk. You're taking that to give something for the person. And I wish I could, because I live in the art world in which that kind of gesture will be so difficult to do. It'll be so out of the box because, you're kind of in a self-preservation mode. You have your galleries you're dealing with, you have your, the marketplace, right? And yet you're free to do this. And your brother received it, which is kind of another miracle to me.
Well, I read a book recently by Dorothy Sayers, if you remember her. She used to write mystery stories, but she was also a theologian. And she wrote this marvelous book called The Mind and the Maker, where she says it's like the Trinity. You have the Creator, but that's not the picture. You have the picture, or in her case, she's talking about writing. You have the picture or the book, but that's not the picture. It's when the person opens the package or opens the book and the spirit moves, then you have the whole thing. So
it's such an amazing book, The Mind of the Maker. It's such an important foundation for theology and the arts. And you had a question?
Yes, when I look at these paintings, I was wondering if you have reaction from children, because there's a magical element, and you can just you start maybe thinking of a story that goes with each one, and it would be interesting to see. I would think that there would be a great response from children watching these. It would just be.
I have illustrated a few stories, some of my own stories, and some phrases in the Bible, or especially ones that have a powerful image. I try to illustrate that image. But I'm not around a lot of children, so I don't know.
I mean, they would really be taken, I think, by this.
I don't know.
I agree.
Prints,
Yeah. Now there are books.
There's one from the Book of Daniel.
Oh yes. Yeah, let's talk about this. Go ahead and.
Well, I was reading the Book of Daniel, and I can't remember the quote, but I put it on the page. But and there was just this vision that came to my mind. What would this look like? Where the person falls on his face, right, in front of this angel, and can't get up. As I recall.
Yeah.
Good. You're more literate than I am. But anyway, so I made the picture of this angel and this person who's fallen on his face before the angel, and then I put the quotes in. But I wanted to see what that would look like.
And you also started with a circle.
I did. You can see.
And the circle is a wing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the angel doesn't look like the typical Florence angels.
Well, I don't think they do, actually.
Tell me more about that.
Well, I think angels For one thing, I believe that they exist, but I also believe that we see what we think we're going to see. If we think we're going to see an angel that's like got flowing white hair and wings and all that stuff, that when we think angel, that's the image that comes to our mind. But there are people in other cultures that see angels very differently, or they see them as shamans, and I've painted a lot of shamans, or they see them as the ability of an animal to go between the worlds and be part animal, part human, in some kind of a fashion. So it's what we expect to see is the way the angel will look to us.
We project.
We
something.
project, and then we build out from that. Or we read into the text and we build out from that.
And you're developing this projection right onto the page, and that's another risk you're taking.
That's another big risk, because I never know, if somebody looks at that and says,
Yeah, that's not ideal.
that doesn't follow the Bible or something. It's like, well, there's versions and versions.
Right.
Well, how does the art relate to your grief processing? How does the art, are they two separate aspects of your life, or do they integrate in a way you're not even familiar with?
How does art
and grief.
integrate? It's always there, Art feeds me. That's how I relax. That's how I process. If I'm upset about something and I can go and work with art, I can work through it.
Yeah, let me follow that thread a little bit.
Yes.
Like, your grief counselor,
Yeah.
right? And you're helping people go through this difficult darkness. And you yourself have gone there. We show the first image where you're literally working out your own grief. How do you think objectively, like those two things, grief and art, connect?
I'm not very good at thinking objectively.
I'm not either. So Alan, he has to help us. But let's at least articulate some of the wording.
Let's go ahead and think subjectively.
Is that okay?
Maybe you want to state the question.
Yeah, I asked the wrong question, didn't I? Yeah. Okay.
Because I don't think art may only appear to be objective from the inside of the mind of the artist. The artist knows what he is. Someone else sees a can of tomato soup or something.
Right.
And so I don't think you can really, I can't really fuse those two things. I can just say that I'm processing. Art is my processing.
For you, you know that they need to be there. Both of them need to be there, right? The person's perception and the art, the possibility of that, rather than you deciding what that means for that person.
Right.
Yeah,
That's on the viewer.
Absolutely.
And every one of you, if you look at one of these pictures, are going to see something different.
Yep.
And some of you are going to like it, and some of you are not going to like it, and some of you will think it's stupid, and some will think it's funny. That's not mine. That's not my fault.
Yeah.
I painted what I saw, and you are going to see what you see. And that's art, right, Mako?
Yeah, absolutely. And the questions that often you get as an artist is, I don't have an answer to.
Good.
But I'm only honest about what is in front of me, what I see, what the materials are telling me. I love the story you told of people coming in and not being able to do anything with a circle, so you squeeze. And I, in my mind, I already am there.
Yeah.
I see it. I can see what happens when what may not happen. Anyways, I can go on and on. So I'll stop. But let's go to the next image and see if we can. Ooh, tell us about this one.
Well, that's one of the shamans. We were talking about angels.
Yeah.
That's a shaman that that's mostly collage, that one. I didn't paint that, I just enhanced it. And you can see, behind him, you can see the lines Ellen, where I built the grid first, you know. The lines across the page were there before the image came to me.
Tell me about the shaman. Who is he? What tribe? Do you know?
Oh, I don't know anything about the shaman. I saw the picture. That's a collage.
Yeah.
So I saw the picture in a magazine and decided I would, and then it didn't have all this other stuff. And in fact, his hands were not, I mean, I messed around with it, you know, to make this, this fire that he's pushing out is turning into flowers. In other words, it's bringing life.
When I see that, I'm thinking Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the poster of yeah, 70s. Which is part of your history, right? I mean, you lived in California. You were at Venice Beach. You were in a community of very creative people.
Very creative people.
Yeah.
I mean, Venice Beach was like the
Right.
craziest of the crazy people.
Right.
The sanest of the sane people,
Right.
very, very rich people, people living on the streets,
Right.
and we all just kind of got along,
Right.
you know. And so I remember going somewhere to another city, and we walked down the sidewalk, and there was a person doing something, lying on the sidewalk, moaning or doing something weird, just something weird. And I just walked by, and I wasn't thinking, I just walked by and I said, well, whatever. And my companion said, I can tell you're from California. Venice Beach.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to
And
be.
this image kind of shows that, you know, whether consciously or directly or not, it just has this. And one thing I do want to note is that you don't have to be able to draw.
No, I can't draw.
Right.
No.
To be able to create something significantly meaningful. How would you help people who you're like, oh, you know, I'm not an artist, I can't draw a stick figure.
Well, I hand them a stack of magazines and I tell them to make a collage. Just tear out, pull out, find things you like and put them on the page. Here's a glue stick. See you in an hour. And it's interesting to see what people come up with. You know, some people come up with text messages, you know, like, relax, or whatever, and then other people just put all flowers and other people mix everything up, and it doesn't matter. The fact is that they put something out from themselves, using the tools at hand to make something.
What happens when we make?
Well, I think back to what I said in the beginning, it releases something that's in us that needs to be released. You know?
Any other questions on this one? Yeah, Alan. Yeah.
What? I know there's this guy called Rorschach,
Yeah.
and could you elaborate on what you know about that science or that whatever you want to call it, and this?
Do you want to talk about that? Rorschach? You know.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is like a Rorschach. But it's a Rorschach that projected from me, and as a Rorschach, it's going to mean something totally different to you. That's the nature of that. So I don't paint other than the frog, which I painted specifically for my brother. I don't paint for somebody. I paint, and then if they like it, that's fine.
Yeah, and there's a realm of projection here too, right? You are projecting something into the world, and somebody may catch it, somebody may not. And that's not up to us to decide. So,
So we've talked a bit about art and healing and how, you know, sometimes the healing comes through this it's a form of processing. So processing loss, processing pain. And I'm wondering if you or somebody you know in processing loss or pain and producing art has ever produced something that they can't see, that's too painful for them to revisit. So are there paintings that you've done that, like, were pain products of pain, and then you can't look at them because they're still painful? Or do you ever get to a point where?
Oh yeah, I've done paintings like that.
Yeah.
You saw the painting that I did of my husband leaving the world. I saw the most amazing thing years ago at Esalen. I saw a woman dancer whose name escapes me, which will come, but who danced her hag, her inner witch, her horrible, mean, ugly, icky person. She was a trained dancer, but she danced it out in front of us, and it was so painful to watch, but so cathartic, because you could just feel the release of this ball of anger, passion, hate, self-loathing, all this stuff coming out as she danced her inner hag. I thought that was fantastic.
And part of the role of the arts, whether it be literature, dance, cinema, theater, is to deal with the darkness, the uncomfortable realities of our lives that most of us want to avoid, frankly. And when you see that on a page of somebody who is creating a collage, or you yourself, maybe sometimes unintentionally it comes out. What do you think as a counselor and also as a person of faith? How do we deal with that darkness, and how do we, is that, for instance, the framing of this is many times, people think I'm an artist and I'm a Christian, so I paint pictures, nice pictures, or at least Jesus is on the cross, and that's what the Christian art does.
Yeah, it makes it awfully cinematic, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
just
how
love
do you
that.
explain that to people who may think that way?
Well, I don't know that it's explainable to somebody. I think one can encourage people to go ahead and paint the one that you hate. Don't stop in the middle. I mean, this is a key point. You're painting something and it's really not turning out well. It's really horrible, as a matter of fact. And your tendency is to take it and toss that one in the can, or tear it up or whatever. I don't think you should do that. I think you should paint it to the end.
Wow.
Because sometimes by adding another layer, or by moving something around, or by just living with it, you can see there is movement there. And yes, you may not like the finished painting, but keep it for a while. Just put it on the shelf. Don't hang it up if you don't like it.
In one of the essays you were reading, right? That's what I say to young artists, in schools is, I'm here as a visiting, artist, and I'm here to critique your work, and so you bring out your best.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
They all lined up, and I challenge them to bring out your worst.
Oh, absolutely. Really, absolutely.
And I say, the best one you can sell and make money from materials. The worst
If you're
one,
lucky.
if you're lucky, worst one you're gonna keep, and 20 years later, you're gonna look at this and learn from this, much more than your best painting.
Yeah.
Because it reveals something about your journey, more honest journey.
Yeah.
And materials will somehow catch through a somatic reality, something in page or something, sound you create or dance that you're honest with, something happens.
Oh, I agree with that. I said, I have a box under my table of paintings that I think are just shit, but I keep them, and every once in a while I look back and go through them, and I'm surprised that some of the images that I'm now painting are iterations of those that I'd forgotten. But you can almost see the through line. Like with the spaceman, it's obvious, but I don't throw your art away. put it away, but don't throw it away.
So we're going to end with that because not only this is a pregnant moment where all of you are saying, I want to know more. I want to see more art. We brought more art, but we're not going to show them because you can actually see the work, not just project them on the screen. You can go see the work in your studio anytime, or not anytime, but make an appointment with you.
Bring coffee.
Yeah, and I think what you said, paint it through, right? Paint it through to the end. I think that's what all of us need to hear, because we all, in some ways, have felt like our lives are incomplete. And our lives may be something that, it's some parts of it we're not proud of.
Right.
And yet you're saying to us that perhaps there's a way to look at that part and definitely not throw it away.
Don't throw it away.
Because that might hold something new to us at some point in our lives, but we have to see it through to let it speak back to us.
I think that's true, but I also think you can, at some point, I would leave it alone for a while. But it's not unheard of to go back months or years later and cut that up into pieces and make a collage out of those pieces and make a new piece of art out of the remnants of the one you didn't like. It's because that also is just part of transiting through the process.
This whole conversation is an invitation for anybody to be part of that process. RoMa, thank you so much for who you are.
Thank you.
And the way that you are allowing yourself, you're taking so many risks, right? So many risks for others to be able to enter into that sacred space of making and fading and collaging and recreating. I'm just so grateful for you and being able to journey. And I hope that this will be a beginning of a journey together into that space that you have created. And in so many ways, I hope that every single person who comes into the church will receive that invitation, because it is in making that God shows up. Right? And we can journey into that together. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mako. You made my day. Yeah.